Pro Tem. I'm going to try to do something a little backwards tonight from what I've typically done. One of my great frustrations here is sitting on Ways and Means, having the joint economic economist as part of my team, and the number of times this place makes promises that the experts around us say, they're completely fraud. And then somehow magically, we never sort of come back a couple of years later and say, hey, here's what you were promised when the Democrats did their Inflation Reduction Act. Here's the actual outcomes. Should we hold people to their own language? So a couple of things I wanted to do here. I'm going to walk through a few boards and try to give some examples of how this place engages in theater that's mathematically void. And what's the term? We lie to you. So how many of you remember a couple of years ago, we're going to put $80 billion into the IRS. Yay! And we're going to collect money on those people, $400,000 up. And you had members of this body, of the White House, and others saying crazy things. And the press, the scribes who basically in many ways should be, have to file with the federal elections because many of the press around here acts more like PR department for the Democrat Party, says better tax enforcement could raise $700 billion over the decade. The White House in 21. Some of the others, some members of Congress think you could get $1 trillion from finding delinquent rich people. Okay, wouldn't that be neat? Wouldn't that make our job so much easier in a Congress that's borrowing, close to $80,000 every second? But remember, this was what you were told. How come no one ever comes behind these microphones 2 years later and say, okay, do we hold you to your language? You built budget documents. You built things on these numbers. Even when I go back to the CBO, and this was the updated numbers. Remember CBO, the one we keep relying on, saying, hey, high of $851 billion over the 10 years in additional collections on those $400,000 up rich people. And the low, $390 billion. And this was one of the excuses the Democrats had for the trillion plus, and depending on how you look at some of the other CBO numbers, so you can see how accurate it is, almost 1.9 trillion in the Inflation Reduction Act, basically how much of it was giveaways to big businesses, environmental groups, other things. Okay, so you told us this. Well, it turns out we're 2 years in now. We're 2 years in. So let's hold them to, okay, you're going to get their average sort of number that came refined as late as this February. We're going to get $400 billion. So for the fun of it, because I'm a pack rat, I saved some of the articles. Here's a fine reporter. IRS says IRS says its hiring surge and funding boost could generate $560 billion more than it thought. $560 billion over the 10 years from their Inflation Reduction Act. 30 days later, the same reporter, that first one's February, this one's March, applications for revenue-generating IRS jobs are far below agency goals. And then if anyone actually reads this stuff, it turns out they had fewer revenue agents, tax collectors at the IRS than they did before, because apparently if you have a good accounting background and you're a tax lawyer and those things, IRS is really where you want to work. But the fact of the matter is that the beauty here is actually in the very article, they actually went down, let's see, if I can find the percentage, they had 8% fewer. And this is after billions and billions and billions of additional money was being given to the IRS. Now, it started with 80. Remember, we used parts of the IRS money as pay-fors last year. So I think they're still sitting on like 57 billion additional on top of their baseline budget for customer service and tax collections. So I saved these articles. Well, what would happen if annually the Treasury has to update what's the real numbers? How are they doing? Well, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, you might get a kick out of this. So it turns out over the 2 years, they've brought in an extra $1.3 billion. That's a lot of money. Now, we're still trying to figure out how much of that money would have just organically eventually come in. Might have come in slower, so they move some of it forward. But if I take $1.3 billion over 2 years and then divide that in half, multiply it by 10, what happened to the $400 billion, or the $1 trillion, or the $700 billion that the Democrats from those microphones were telling us they were going to get by going after the $400,000 and up rich people? And this, my point here is this, so often this place, because it's mathematically vacuous, builds these promises that are complete fraud. Now, do I think people who have high income should pay their fair share? Absolutely. Actually, it's not even their fair share. They should pay what the law tells them they have to pay. Okay, that's fair. But it turns out there were lots of articles that had been coming up saying it was a fraud, but no one around here was willing to pay attention to it, saying, you know, the Department of Treasury, IRS, announces 1.3 recovery, high income. It's not anything close. Treasury raised nowhere near what Democrats expected from tax enforcement. So one of the reasons I'm doing this sort of backwards is I come behind this microphone week after week after week, sort of saying, here's the scale of the debt. Here's the drivers of the debt. The drivers of the debt from today through the next 30 years are demographics. And I get screamed at when I'm home saying, David, stop telling us the truth. From today through the next 30 years, about 75% of all the debt, remember, we're expecting in 30 years to be like 116, 120 trillion in debt. 75% of that will be functionally Medicare, and in 9, 10 years when the Social Security Trust Fund is gone, do we backfill that and have to use general fund for it? That's math, but it doesn't have to be that way. But you can't fix things if this place keeps making crap up. And look, the other thing I found, and I'm just adding some irony to parts of this discussion, because this is way back, June 26th, so not that long ago. It turns out only 31% who called the IRS could get someone to answer the phone. We gave them billions and billions and billions to do this. Is it time to stop attacking people like me? It says it's time for a revolution using technology. The fact of the matter is you could actually adopt the very technology saying, if I need some information, I'm going to call, and yes, I'm talking to a chat GPT, but it can stay on the phone with me. It can help me fill out my forms. It doesn't want to hang up on me. It can text me the video I need to know to how to fill it out. And the fact of the matter is the IRS is the second most unionized agency in the federal government. They don't like the fact that technology could really improve customer service. Well, it turns out technology could actually be fairer, more accurate, and you don't run into the Lowe's learner problem. That's a way back, so if you don't know the name, Google it. You can audit an algorithm, you can audit AI, you can audit those things to seeing if it's being biased and chased. I can't audit a leftist IRS employee who's going after certain conservative groups. You want a fair tax system. You want an efficient tax system. They're sitting on what is now $57 billion. You're 2 years in, and it's still not working. Now, look, I chair the oversight in Ways and Means. I meet with some of the IRS officials. They actually have some competent people over there. But I can't figure out what's going on when these things just aren't happening. So part of this is I want us to understand I can't fix the math if we're going to keep lying about it. So here's another article I just grabbed from Politico, and I think it was from yesterday. As part of also the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, which is a completely Orwellian named bill, because you've all seen the articles. It did just the opposite to the economy. It extended the inflationary period. How politics hung up a $42 billion internet build-out. Okay. Here's the thought experiment. And this, once again, when I'm done saying this, tomorrow there will be lobbyists in my office angry that I actually talked about this. Because remember, everything in Washington, D.C. is actually about the money. It is. And let's be brutally honest about it. So here's $42 billion that was supposed to help bring broadband to rural America. Okay, come with me sometime to my Navajo Nation in northern Arizona, which is bigger than some of the states back here on the East Coast. I have chapter houses. I have communities out there that have been waiting decades to get a broadband line. And yet, if you take a look, there's been millions and millions and millions and millions spent. In this case, billions were appropriated. So if I came to you and said, okay, we really, if we want to have telehealth, if we want to have digital health, if we want to have the living classrooms where, it's the greatest science teacher who's available to the entire country because you're doing it through the internet, broadband is moral, great. Is it moral waiting decades? Is it moral subsidizing and subsidizing and subsidizing somehow that bit of fiber, that wire never gets there? So if I came to you, because hopefully everyone around here is smart, said, we can't keep doing this, what would you do? Crazy idea. Go out to the middle of nowhere and put this little satellite dish and then a couple repeaters around that provide Wi-Fi, and guess what? 48 hours later, boom, you have broadband at a fraction of the fraction of a fraction of the fraction of the cost. And welcome to this century. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. Well, I've proposed it, and it's never going to move forward because the other side makes lots of contributions, lobbies around here, and the absurdity. But it's another example. I'm trying to burn into this place. Join this century of technology. Unless it's better off to keep subsidizing, and then waiting a couple more decades so you can get broadband to your rural community, or you could have it this week at a fraction of the cost to the U.S. taxpayers. Look, I have a whole presentation, some of you have seen it before, where one of the things the Democrats did 2 years ago is we're going to lower insulin prices. You know what they actually did is they functionally took $16 billion, handed it to Big Pharma, the very pharma they attack all the time, and said, wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to attack you. You give us contributions, of course. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Here's $16 billion to buy down the price of insulin. So they didn't actually lower it. What they did is once again, the Democrat theory is everything's up for subsidization. Subsidize your way because it makes the receivers of that cash beholden. They're rent seekers. All of a sudden you notice that all these folks that are receiving these subsidies happen to keep showing up supporting the left. And what was immoral about that is, 70, 75 miles from here, there's something called Civica RX. Anyone who's crazy enough to watch something like this, look it up. 3 types of generic insulin. It's a co-op. It's a co-op with, I believe, the California Medicaid system, some private insurance companies, some healthcare providers, some hospitals, and they're selling those 3 generic insulins cheaper than the $16 billion subsidized. Why wouldn't this place have done something saying, hey, these things are off patent? We could actually incentivize groups that want to come together and make them cheaper, better, faster, more available. Wow, what a crazy idea. We want to lower drug prices, create competition, but make everyone compete against each other. Make those companies that want the cash subsidy say, screw you, we're going to actually encourage the co-ops to make it. I made these proposals, and you get stared at saying, no, David, you don't understand. We're Democrats. We do subsidization. They don't actually want competition. They don't actually want lower prices. They want people beholden to them. And then they could take part of that cash, part of that $16 billion, and go look up, I'll give you a company name, but I believe there's multiple firms doing that. It's Vertex. Read the articles of what they're doing for type 1 diabetes. They apparently have a number of folks who've actually been cured of type 1. Isn't the cure the morality? Instead, this place is fixated on maintaining your misery. It's immoral, but that's not what this place does. It's in some ways, I believe the intellects around here somehow need your misery, you to be attached to the system. If 33% of all U.S. healthcare is diabetes, why isn't literally every other speaker behind these microphones talking about how we're going to save our brothers and sisters? Now, I accept that's type 2, type 1's autoimmune, this and that, but the concept and the discussions, if you actually read the academic papers, what would happen if just a fraction of that cash went into actually pursuing curatives? The cure is the morality. So let's actually walk through a bit more of my rage, and please forgive me, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. In some ways, this is my therapy, because I get so angry all day long listening to crazy and folks that are a decade out of date in what they think they know, and just saying, but there's a solution. So, economy could be $29.5 billion larger if all opioid deaths since 2018, so it's functionally 6 years, were avoided. You go, huh? Anyone that's following me right now, if you're the opposition researcher for the Democrats who want to just beat the crap out of me, if you think it's moral, go look up fentanyl vaccine. I think it's going into 2A trials very shortly. Apparently it's a protein attacher, makes it so it can't go through the brain-blood barrier. In the last 6 years, 390,000 of our brothers and sisters have died of fentanyl. I think one of my boards here is going to say 345,000 prime-age Americans died of fentanyl. That's the morality of this place. Oh, let's give some more money to doing the same thing we've been doing over and over. You know, and think of it as everything from border security policy to the poor, the firefighter who's just trying to save someone who gets exposed. In my county, I had someone tell me that at least my city of Phoenix, there may be 2-3 dead people every single day from fentanyl. So what would happen if I came to you tomorrow and said, hey, they think they actually have, it would be once or twice a year. It's not a traditional vaccine. That's just the language if you look it up. It basically has your body attached to the protein so it can't pass the brain-blood barrier. There apparently is, for a number of narcotics, this type of technology appears to be working. Take a little bit of that money and help bring it to market. Save people's lives. We live in a country where we may be about to have the 5th year in a row where prime-age males are dying younger. In 15, 14 years, America has more deaths than births. 6 years, 390 of our brothers and sisters are dead. And how many times have you seen someone come behind this microphone and even talk about it? So if you want to think like an economist, just think about what you could do to grow the economy. If it's about the money, hey, you see the theme I'm trying to sell here. So, when you're going to have the Democrats come behind, and maybe even the debate tonight, you know, we need rich people to pay their fair share. Those people over 400,000. Okay, just because this was a factoid I got from Virginia Fox a little while ago, and it screamed in my head. If I came to you and said the student loan forgiveness that the administration is desperately pushing because they desperately need the votes. Remember, it's vote buying. It's functionally pay for play. Hey, now vote for us. If I told you 750,000 of those individuals who the Biden administration make over $312,000. Yet every dime of this is borrowed money. You're going to take working class people, many of them that did not have the blessing like I've had and others in this body to go to school, to university, to go to grad school, things like that. You're going to ask working people who don't make anything close to $300,000+ to subsidize. This is the morality of this place. But it's great vote buying. And yet, if I come to you right now, and now we're going to do some of the financial, over 14%, the actual real number isn't 14.1, I think it's 14.48 or something like that. Over 14% of the entire federal government spending this year is interest. Is interest on the U.S. debt. So once again, this is important. Social Security, #1 spend, but it's self-funding, at least for a little while. Now remember, when we say self-funding, most of it comes in as the FICA tax, you know, the 12.4 we all pay. Your employer typically pays half, you pay half. And then a little portion where the Treasury has to go sell debt to pay back the money they've borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund. And what is it, in 9 years or so, that trust fund is that money that the Treasury's borrowed is all gone. And then we got to figure out how we're going to keep our Americans from having, what is it, 17+% cut, doubling senior poverty. All right. 14.5% of all of our spending today is just interest. Social Security, #1. This year, I believe it's $1,460.80 billion. Interest, if you do sort of total interest we owe to the trust funds, interest we owe to anyone that bought one of our bonds, whether it be your union pension fund or nice family on the other side of the world, that's actually the #2 expenditure in this government. Interest is #2. Medicare is #3. Defense is actually #4. So the next time you're with your liberal relatives and saying, just cut defense, remind them, it's now #4. The thing that's in the Constitution is now #4. And some of the projections over the next 10 years, that number almost doubles on interest. Because we have this insatiable appetite, and I need to keep showing some of these numbers so they make sense. This one seems to hit home. So think of this, 2024, the fiscal year we're in right now. If gross interest comes in at $1,140 billion, or $140 billion, 45.68% of every income tax dollar. So when you pay your income taxes, almost half of it, a little less than half of it, is just paying interest. So think of that, when you're out there working your heart out, and you see that income tax bill you have on your paycheck, 45%, a little over 45% of that is just paying interest of this government. How many times have you seen people come behind these microphones and talk about this? Remember, Interest is the fragility. If the bond market gets cranky because we do something stupid and interest rates spike up, I can make you an argument that over the next few years, you want to know who really runs this government? It's not us. It will be the bond market. Because you want things, and I need to show you on the next board. This is this year's budget. Okay, 26%, the blue, I get to vote on. Yet we're borrowing 30%. So every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed. And a wedge of, let's pretend it's Medicare, or any other thing in the red, which is on autopilot. That's what we call mandatory. It's earned benefits. Some benefits you get because you're part of a certain tribal group, you fall below a certain income. But this is on autopilot. This isn't voted on. Remember I showed you a board a second ago that over 14% is just interest? Well, think about that. If 26% is what we call discretionary, defense and non-defense, next time you're at home and you're talking to your voters and they say, I want you to balance the budget today. Okay, I can do it, but are you ready to get rid of all the defense of this country? Constitutional obligation, but we'll just get rid of, how about all of non-defense discretionary? Now that's the Park Service, that's the State Department, that's the FBI, that's everything, it's all gone. And then tell me what part of mandatory spending you want us to get rid of. There seems to be this lack of understanding of the reality, both on where the spending, this danger, the fragility this country has from the debt. And look, tonight I had only a half an hour, and I have a stack of these things where, particularly the 2 years the Democrats ran this place, they didn't tell the truth about, they made up fake numbers. We haven't hit anything close to that, and CBO seems to be sometimes months, if not years, behind on telling us the truth and how we make the numbers work. There's ways you can make this another American century. But you got to do it through a calculator. You got to stop trying to legislate around here by people's feelings. And yet, if you want to be on television tonight, say something theatrical. Say something over the top. Say something that's a great dopamine hit. But if you want to save the country, learn the damn math. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you.